Hello, everybody, and welcome to our UFC 247 post show. I'm John Pollock, joined as always by Phil Chertok, coming out of tonight's card from the Toyota Center in Houston, Texas. And Houston, we have a judging problem. How are you, Phil?
I'm good. How are you doing, John?
I'm doing better than some people that were just outraged about some of the scoring. The two most I'm very concerned about are Joe Rogan and Dominick Reyes. I don't know if they're going to make it. I think these guys are having an out-of-body experience by the end of this broadcast. I had to turn it off to come chat with you. I was very worried about these two.
I feel like they're going to, shut everything down. The lights are going to go out, and they're still going to be there in their, shirts, their finely ironed shirts, and they'll still be discussing the poor judging.
Yes, that was the theme of the night for Joe Rogan and Dominick Reyes, and it was kind of set off with a bad decision on the undercard, and it sort of just continued. We had some wacky scores on this show, to put it mildly, and then it kind of culminated in the main event where, let me preface by saying, I don't think that this was a bad decision, but there was an awful scorecard in the main event of 49-46 for Jon Jones that we'll get into. But yes, we will be diving into all of these different scorecards. But I guess we can just start there, Phil. And I think we should just focus on the main event off the top with Jon Jones and Dominick Reyes. I'm concerned that there's going to be so much attention on this one judge's scorecard that I hope it really doesn't overshadow what I thought was a phenomenal main event.
Yeah, it was a really great fight. Up until this point of the night, there was a bunch of great fights, and Jon Jones has a way of sort of ruining a good party. And it didn't happen this time. It was a really awesome fight, and it was really exciting all throughout, all 5 rounds.
Yeah, like this has got to be the best Jon Jones fight in, man, a long time, I would have to say. There was a lot of drama with the Thiago Santos fight because of how close it was and the injury that Thiago Santos was dealing with. But in terms of just a competitive back and forth fight, I mean, this to me was among the best Jon Jones fights I have seen.
Yeah, for sure. It was right up there. I mean, it was up there with the Cormier and the Gustafsson fights, which are the sort of landmark fights of his career so far.
So, I mean, we can go through this fight, but to me, the story of this was Dominick Reyes coming out, and he put on such relentless pressure on Jon Jones from the second the fight began, and he didn't want to give Jones a chance to even catch his breath in that opening flurry as he came right at him. And I think most people saw the first 2 rounds going for Dominick Reyes. He was putting a ton of pressure on him, setting up his left hand, attacking the legs, and it was Jones kind of in this unfamiliar role of having to react and adjust on the fly to Dominick Reyes, who was just smothering him. But the trade-off to that was he had to expend a ton of energy in those 2 rounds. So in my opinion, he banked 2 rounds at the beginning of the fight. Then we get into the 3rd round, and this became a very close round, and probably the round that most people will debate in terms of who you had on your scorecard by the end of things. But it was still Dominick Reyes that was landing with high kicks. Jones would land, and in one sequence, Jones landed, and Reyes made him pay by just chasing him down. And this was the first attempt of a takedown for Jon Jones. It came in the 3rd, and he got blocked, and it was a close round. Reyes outlanded him in the 3rd, but Jones, you could argue, may have had the better quality strikes. And then the 4th and 5th, these were Jon Jones rounds. Reyes had gotten tired, although to his credit, he got taken down twice in the 4th round and he popped up immediately. But Jones had a great ending to the 4th round. He landed a head kick, an elbow, a big left hook, to kind of, in my opinion, seal the round. And then the 5th was a dominant Jon Jones round, with a takedown, spin kick to the body. Reyes was just extremely tired in the 5th round. So after 5 rounds, Phil, my scorecard read 48-47, Dominick Reyes. How about you? First of all, your thoughts on the fight?
Yeah, the fight was tremendous. Reyes came out hot out of the blocks pretty much in every round. And in the first 2 rounds, it was definitely effective, particularly in the first round. In the second round, the sort of longer story of the fight began to emerge, where Jones was able to establish his pressing, and the relentless pace that Reyes set in the first round, he couldn't maintain. But Reyes was still able to end very strong in the second round, and I thought won that as well. The third round, this story continued about Jones pressing and Reyes fading, but Reyes was still effective, continuing to move, and I gave him that round as well. But it was
close.
It was close. And then rounds 4 and 5 were just decisive. Jones really just went on the offense. Reyes generally was on the back foot, avoiding engagement, but countering still and landing, but never really hurting Jon. And Jon was able to secure wrestling takedowns as well, but never establishing position. And then the 5th round, Jones really took over and was extremely effective in that round. So ultimately I had it 3 rounds to 2 for Reyes, with 3 being a toss-up. But as sort of Dominick Cruz talked about in the post-fight, there is more to this story than just the individual rounds. Like, the momentum that Jones carried into the end of the fight says a lot. And the scorecards can't really capture that.
Yeah, and it was, he's fresh off a fight, and I don't know exactly the message he was trying to convey, but Jon Jones was asked about if he thought he had done enough to win the fight, and his argument was, well, that 5th round alone, I think I won the fight with that 5th round. And I don't know exactly what he was trying to say, but that's not how scoring works. Like, you had a great 5th round. That means you won the 5th round. You've got to win 3 out of 5 rounds in order to win the fight. And that's where, some people will say, well, you've got to beat the champ to win the title. And it's like, that's not how the scoring works. If you beat him by an inch in 3 of those rounds, it doesn't matter how narrow it is. You've won 3 rounds to 2. You're the new champion. Like, that's just how scoring works. The judges' scorecards were 48-47, 48-47, and yes, 49-46, all for Jon Jones. And I was certainly surprised that Reyes didn't even get a card in his favor on a night where we had tons of split decisions. 49-46 was absolutely ludicrous. I can take 48-47 either way, but there's no way you can give 4 rounds to either guy. I would have been just as stunned if Reyes got 4 rounds in this fight. But to me, 48-47 for Jones, I think that's an acceptable scorecard. And if you want to look at this, there was one brutal scorecard in here, I can't begrudge the 2 48-47s for Jon Jones, even though I had it going the other way for Dominick Reyes. So that's kind of how I felt about the scoring.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I mean, I don't agree with the 49-46. Like, I'm not as outraged as you, but I think that may be a manifestation of just this, it's a compound interest type thing.
Well, the part that I think is going to upset the most people is that this judge, who, part of me feels some sympathy for, because this guy is just going to get torn apart in the fallout of this event. Joe Solis, who has done a handful of UFC fights over the past 5 to 6 years. And to me, this is the world championship fight, and you have a card that could drastically alter history. Could you imagine, the responsibility of being in that position? And this was a guy who had an insane card earlier in the night, and here he is in he is one of 3 individuals scoring this light heavyweight championship fight with arguably the greatest fighter of all time and his legacy at stake, with someone who turned in 4 scorecards in 2014, 1 in 2015, did 3 Bellator fights in 2016 that he rendered a decision for, 2 in 2017, and then tonight. That is his history, according to MMA Decisions.
Look, Texas has a sordid history in the MMA game. And, this is another evening in the not so illustrious, history books. I mean, it's all too familiar for me to really get overly emotional about. That's the thing, right? Like, we've been here, done that so many times in the past. And I guess because in the end, ultimately nobody really got robbed, or like, it'll all be forgotten.
I think most people can, even if they scored the fight for Reyes, they can accept 48-47 cards for Jon Jones. I think that is at most disagreeable for people, but not outrageous scorecards at all. Like, the third round to me, like, it was a close round. I scored it for Reyes, but I can see others seeing it for Jones. But coming out of this, I think, the silver lining to me is that this was the performance of a lifetime for Dominick Reyes. I think there's many questions about what Jon Jones does next, but I think that Dominick Reyes, he certainly comes out of this with his stock at a high point, not as high as had he won and ended the streak of Jon Jones, but I think he did himself tremendous good as he went into this fight, an enormous underdog, and he comes out of this, to me, a sizable commodity, and I think a great demand to see a rematch between these two at some point.
Yeah, I do think that people would like to see a rematch. The problem with that is it's a challenging fight to set up, because you don't really want to do it immediately, although it's not inconceivable, because the light heavyweight landscape is fairly barren. But if you really wanted to set it up properly, you got to put him in there with somebody who's going to test him over 5 rounds, and there's not really, it's hard to think of somebody who could do that. So I don't know what you do with him in the meantime, but in the future, yeah, I think people will want to see that. Yeah.
How about Jon Jones, just in terms of this performance, coupled with the last number of fights we've seen against Anthony Smith, against Thiago Santos? Like, we saw Jon Jones tonight that, left with his championship by a very slim margin. This to me is not this unbeatable force. This is a guy that, tonight he got the benefit that 3 judges saw it his way tonight. But what did you make of the overall performance of Jon Jones? And do you have any kind of hesitancy to see this guy either move to heavyweight, or do you think that if he fought Dominick Reyes again, it could be a different outcome?
Okay, so a lot of questions there.
Yeah, I threw a lot at you there.
Yeah, so I thought his performance was quite good. I thought it was impressive how he weathered the storm and once again faced adversity and dug deep and found a way to win, even though I didn't quite agree with the decision. And I do think it's impressive how in the 5th round and 4th round and the 3rd round, he continued to push a pace despite getting hit with big shots. So even had he lost, it was still somewhat impressive to me. Now, that being said, Dominick Reyes showed a lot, and for the first time showed a blueprint on maybe how you can beat Jones. Like, even though Cormier had success in the second fight, it's hard to imagine recreating that. But Reyes' style, the movement and attacking and not giving an inch, I could see somebody else at least trying that. I know easier said than done, but so it's sort of like win-win in a strange way. Now, that being said, it does raise more questions about going to heavyweight, because Jones had a tough time securing the wrestling here, and it's going to be even harder against, the top wrestlers at the heavyweight division.
Right. And, the questions about putting weight on, I mean, how would that affect Jones later in the fight? That was a huge positive for him in this fight, having that gas tank for late in the fight. And, still having, to me, that speed in this fight, for all of the big power shots Reyes was coming at him with, and certainly landing with some, Jones' defense is still tremendous. I was very impressed with that, and kind of how he dealt with Reyes late in that fight. I thought this was a really excellent performance still from Jon Jones, and how he dealt with, being down 2 rounds and how he adjusted from that for the final 3.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
So, just looking here at, MMA decisions, and of the people that did turn in scorecards, I mean, the majority had it for Reyes, but there were some cards here for Jones, but all the scores were 48-47, going either way. I did put a poll on Twitter. I got about 400 votes here. 72% believing Dominick Reyes won this fight. So, Phil, as you look into your crystal ball that we all depend on you for, Jon Jones, when does he fight next? And at what weight class? What would be your prognostication for 2020? Do you think he takes a big break after this?
It really depends on, the state of his health, and the landscape. I mean, there's a Corey Anderson fight happening at light heavyweight, but that's not really terribly interesting. I do feel he'll have a fight because he still wants to make up for lost time, from his suspensions and, other, troubles. But it is difficult to imagine an opponent right now, especially if the UFC is trying to make a different heavyweight fight with, Cormier. I'm not sure what you do with him.
Yeah. Your options are, it's that winner of Corey Anderson, Jan Blachowicz, and outside of that, it's looking to me, if it's at light heavyweight, Dominick Reyes, the rematch to me is kind of the most interesting for me personally, if we're not looking at heavyweight.
Yeah, I mean, give Reyes, 6 months maybe, and give him that he'll have a lot of confidence going into it. He'll prepare better. I expect he'll be better in the 4th and 5th round. So demand
the fight take place in another state.
I mean, well, Nevada. I don't know.
I mean, two of the judges in this fight, it's not like they were regular judges that judge all over the place. It was really the one, Joe Solis, that seemed to be a Houston representative from the local scene there.
You wonder if this fight was in Texas because they have a different threshold for like the amount of picograms that you can, delay a fight for or whatever.
Well, you would still be subjected to the USADA testing, so I don't think that would be. In the old days, you could certainly look at that, and that was kind of the reputation Texas would have about, if you're going to go commission shopping, that's where you could end up. But with USADA, I mean, I'm sure, and they've said the amount of testing that Jones has undergone. Plus, they've made some of those adjustments as well to kind of curb that effect of the pulsing, so that if it is a certain level, it's not going to similar like what happened with Nate Diaz.
Well, I just even with that, he had the initial problem was in Nevada, and they weren't comfortable with the fight proceeding, and USADA was comfortable with the fight proceeding. So USADA was happy enough to agree to move the fight to another state. So maybe this time they just chose a state where it wouldn't be an issue regardless. I mean, and the previous time it was in California, right? Didn't he fight his last fight in California?
Well, Thiago Santos was back in Vegas, wasn't it? Because that was International Fight Week.
Got it. Everything was good again. They're all friendly again.
Any other thoughts coming out of the main event before we go to what was your real main event? I know going into this with Valentina Shevchenko.
Well, I mean, I don't know about that being my real main event, but certainly something I was looking forward to.
Well, it had no judging controversy. Spoiler, everybody. Valentina Shevchenko made this completely undisputed. She looked fantastic in this fight. She came out of the gate with Katlyn Chookagian, who among the bigger underdogs in a championship fight in recent memory, a plus 750 underdog. Valentina Shevchenko listed as a minus 1,200 favorite, and completely justified. Shevchenko came out attacking her with leg kicks, and then near the end of the round, she caught a kick, took Chookagian down, and sliced open her, just above her left eye, and Chookagian goes back to her corner. She is just leaking blood, and her coach just looks at her and says, everything's going fine. It was just one elbow. And she's just like gushing blood. But the cut man there did a very good job of concealing this cut. The second round began. Again, Chookagian got taken down into half guard. She was able to recover to full guard at one point, but again, it was a Shevchenko round highlighted by several kicks, one to the leg, one to the body, and then this spinning wheel kick that they replayed it in slow motion between rounds, then they played it in real time so everyone could hear the sound of it as well. And the announcers were very impressed by this spinning wheel kick that Chookagian was able to absorb. Third round, Chookagian cannot pull guard, and it leads to a trip takedown. Shevchenko moves to the crucifix position and just starts dropping elbows into punches and gets to stoppage at 1 minute, 3 seconds of the third round, making her third defense of the UFC Flyweight Championship. To me, a pretty flawless performance from Valentina Shevchenko.
Absolutely. Flawless. She made no mistakes, dominated the fight, got a finish, and once again demonstrated that she is on a completely different level than the rest of the women in her division.
Yeah, and that kind of was the talking point after, was like, what do you do with this woman at flyweight? She is so far and above where the rest of the contenders are, and it's just trying to find contenders for her at this point. There's always the doing another fight with Amanda Nunes, but it's going to be like the Katlyn Chookagians of the world that you're going to be seeking at 125 pounds for Shevchenko, and unless somebody comes along, I mean, it looks like it's a pretty dominant run that Shevchenko's on, which again, to our point of a couple weeks ago, I do think it was a blessing in disguise that Maycee Barber lost that fight to Roxanne Modafferi. It's unfortunate she's going to be out for a while with a torn ACL, but had Maycee Barber won that fight, Phil, as we're looking at the contenders now, like save for like a Joanne Calderwood, I think Maycee Barber gets thrown to the wolves very early in her career if she had beaten Roxanne.
It's possible, yeah. I mean, there's not a lot of options at that weight class. So that's the state of affairs. And like right now,
Chookagian was ranked 1. She's beaten Jessica Ai. This is just the order of the rankings. Then you have Joanne Calderwood, Jennifer Maia, Roxanne Modafferi, Vivian Araujo, and Lauren Murphy, who we'll get to later, and Andrea Lee. Followed by Maycee Barber, Alexis Davis. That's your top 10.
Yeah, I mean, there's levels to this, that adage, and she's on another level than the division. She's almost on 2 different levels, right? Like it's pretty crazy. The skill she displays, like the all around package, like everything about her, right? Like it's like, she's a great personality. She speaks these multiple languages. She's just destroying these women. It's awesome. Yeah, this was just a, there are no holes to speak of in this performance. Just greatly outmatched, Katlyn Chookagian. Justin Tafa and Juan Adams on the main card here. This was a quick heavyweight fight. Justin Tafa, only his second UFC fight, after losing his debut to Jorgen De Castro back at UFC 243 in October.
He kept this short. He connected with some early left-handed strikes that got through, and that set up a right hook and a right uppercut that dropped Juan Adams, and he just followed with a barrage of shots, ending this a minute 59 of the first round by TKO, and that was it for Juan Adams.
Yeah, fun fight. Nice to have a quick finish on the main card that's going to have, potentially 2 5-rounders. So exciting. Let's see Tafa in there with somebody with a little bit more polish.
If you were to create a $65 plus tax pie chart, how big of a slice of your $65.99 would be dedicated to Justin Tafa and Juan Adams on this pay-per-view? 10%, 5%.
I mean, I don't really think about it like that. I think about it like pretty much it's like 100% goes to Jon Jones and Valentina Shevchenko.
Well, you just answered the question then. So this was of zero value to you. That was
well, I mean, that's not how I want to.
You're being very harsh on these two rising fighters, just trying to make a living, and they're worthless.
Is my time worthless, John? Is that what you're saying?
Are you saying I didn't say it was worthless. You defined it as 100% of your money went towards the top 2 fights. These two mean nothing.
No. You defined it as that. I just said it's not worth money. That doesn't mean it's worthless.
That's exactly what worthless means. You just said because I said it's not worth money doesn't mean it's worthless.
Time is worth more, John. Time is worth more than money. That's why you pay people to save you time.
So this was quality time you spent with Justin Tafa and Juan Adams.
Yes.
Well, this did happen on a pay-per-view. Danny Ige versus Mirsad Bektic. I was looking forward to this fight. I thought this was hardly the deepest card, but this to me was an interesting fight. Danny Ige lost his UFC debut, but then he's rattled off 4 wins coming into this. Mirsad Bektic, certainly a big prospect at 145 pounds, came up short against Josh Emmett last July where he got stopped, and training at TriStar with Faraz Zahabi, who is in his corner for this fight. This one, they split the first 2 rounds. Dan Ige lit him up with his shots in the first round. It was all striking from Dan Ige. Then in the second, Bektic got the takedown and just worked on top, and at one point worked for an arm triangle from Mount. Did you think he could pull this off from Mount, Phil, as our jiu-jitsu expert here on the show?
It looked like it was happening. But then it sort of became pretty apparent that it wasn't. So I was a little bit surprised that he didn't step off into side control, because if you get perpendicular to your opponent in side control, essentially perpendicular, then you can drive a lot more force into the choke, into the shoulder, squeezing it into the neck. So I'm surprised that he didn't do that after the initial attempt didn't work, but you can finish it. And I believe Joe Rogan was commenting on that during the sequence as well. But nonetheless, it was still pretty impressive, very impressive top control. And, it turned the fight around for Bektic at that point.
Yeah. They mentioned in commentary that Zahabi had mentioned that, George St. Pierre had told Bektic that he has as strong a top game as anyone he has trained with. So that's a hell of a comment from George St. Pierre. So it came down to the third round. I had it even going into this one. Danny Ige hit him with several elbows to the side of the head. They got separated off the fence, and then Bektic is going for the single leg. Ige stepped over, tried for an armbar, lost that, and Bektic just held on to his waist, but couldn't do much with it. So we went to the judges' scorecards, split decision in favor of Dan Ige, with all the scores 29-28. And Dan Ige gets his 5th win in a row, and will probably get a pretty notable featherweight after this. This was a very big win over a very, hot prospect in Mirsad Bektic.
Yeah, it was a big win. I do wonder if he will get a big name because of the way that the featherweights are sort of like shaping up. You mentioned Emmett, who was supposed to fight I think it was last week or recently, and couldn't make it. He'd be a nice opponent, but neither of them are that well known, and both are like looking extremely good right now. So I'm not sure who you match them up with, because it seems like everybody's got a dance partner right now.
Yeah, it's a super deep division. I guess it would be for Dan Ige hoping just to crack that top 15. Like that's how deep this roster is when these two aren't even in the top 15. So we'll see what happens with Dan Ige. Afterwards, I believe he was doing an interview with ESPN, and he threw out Korean Zombie's name, which to me, that you kind of got to be realistic with what you're shooting for. I don't know if he's propelling himself to get a fight with Korean Zombie, but I guess shoot your shot. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, I guess get your name out there, but I agree. I think you need to pick somebody a little bit more realistic. I think, just pick somebody on the outside of the top 10. That's really the best.
Derrick Lewis was opening up the pay-per-view, and he came out to a hero's welcome here in Houston just after turning 35 this week, taking on Ilir Latifi, who was moving up to heavyweight and came in at 246.5 pounds. How did you think Latifi looked at heavyweight?
I think he actually looked all right. I mean, dare I say that this was a good move for the man.
He looked like a piece of furniture. Like that's what this guy is like, built like. He looked like a giant dresser. That's what he resembled to me.
Okay.
In the first round, Derrick Lewis was dead set on landing a flying knee, and he threw several of them in this fight, and he hit Latifi with a pair of head kicks. This is the most deceptive looking man at 200. I loved it. John Anik was noting how Derrick Lewis is he's lighter now. It's like, yes, he's lighter from cutting down to 265 to coming in at 261.5 pounds. So yes, technically lighter, but this man is still a monster. And it's just incredible to watch this guy and some of his offensive choices. So I had Lewis winning the first. In the second, Latifi worked very hard in the clinch with his overhooks and was able to get Lewis off of the cage, down to the ground and into half guard. And they eventually get stood up. And this was interesting because Joe Rogan was noting the referee can stand these guys up at any point now. And I have heard Joe Rogan complain so many times about stand-ups, and here he seemed like more than ready to see Latifi lose his top position here. And that's what happened. They got up. Latifi still controlled the round. And then we go to the third, and it's looking to be going Latifi's way. He was able to get another takedown, but Lewis got up. And then in the final minute, it was like Derrick Lewis saw that there were 60 seconds left, and he was going to throw absolutely everything in his arsenal at this dude. He just threw wildly. He connected with shots. He hit this big right hand. He drilled him with a right uppercut. And I really thought, Phil, it was this final 60 seconds that won Derrick Lewis the fight. Did you agree?
Well, let me consult my notes. Okay, what do I have here? Round 3, 10-9 Lewis for 1 minute from hell after fighting off the wrestling. So yes. I agree with your
exact analysis. It's like we're mirroring each other. Dominick Cruz actually was like, he was furious about this decision. It was all three had it 29-28 for Derrick Lewis, and Cruz was arguing like the wrestling of Latifi. And I was like, it's not like they scored this 30-27 for Lewis. It would be ridiculous to have given him the second round, but I thought 29-28, that to me was the score of this fight. I thought he won the first, and I thought that last minute clinched this fight for him. So I had to disagree with Dominick Cruz in this.
Yeah, I think, again, it was things adding up over the night.
There was definitely a growing frustration, especially among with Dominick Cruz, you could sense.
Yeah. And particularly, I think he was just frustrated that, like, no understanding of anything that wasn't this, whatever was perceived as boxing. So.
Yeah, but to me, it's like Latifi, he got him down once in the third, but to me, it was hardly enough to justify the round when you compare the damage that Lewis was able to do in that final minute. So Derrick Lewis gets the victory. And afterwards he talked about smoking a lot of weed, and it was a Derrick Lewis interview. And, you know, this is a guy that's, this guy's going to have a job for life in UFC as long as he wants it. And I mean, this is his second win in a row after the Blagoy-Ivanov fight, and has quietly fought 19 times in the UFC, 14 of those victories.
Yeah, I mean, he's a staple of the heavyweight division. He's a workhorse. He fights several times a year. He's getting better. You tongue in cheek mocked, sort of like the notes on the weight. But if you look at his physique over, the course of his career, he's getting leaner, but he's still, massive. And, his shoulders are getting bigger, and, he's throwing these kicks, and he wasn't as tired as he normally gets in these fights. So, he's improving, and he's going to be dangerous. I'd like to see him set up some of these crazy attacks, though. They just come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And like, his instincts are good. The timing is nice, but it's just, you got to set it up a little bit better. Yeah.
Yeah. He's in an interesting spot in the heavyweight division. He's in that upper section of heavyweights. And to me, it is, I don't know. I really have no idea what you do with Curtis Blaydes, who just seems to be waiting for this title fight to occur with Miocic and Daniel Cormier. That doesn't seem to be happening anytime soon. So if you're the UFC, do you push Curtis Blaydes to take a fight in the interim, because Derrick Lewis becomes an option for that? But if you're Blaydes, do you take a risky fight at this point versus waiting?
Blaydes has to take a fight, because there's he might not get.
He could sit out the whole year if he's waiting.
Yeah, well, yeah, he could. I don't think it's like. It's not like the UFC is terribly interested in a Curtis Blaydes title match. So what is going to happen? It's not like his stock is going to go up if he waits. So he's got to take a fight. And Derrick Lewis is a big name. And have they not fought already? If they haven't fought already, then they should fight.
They have not fought before. So it'd be a fresh fight at heavyweight, and maybe that is what you push for next.
And it can main event, because mean, Blaydes is main evented already now, and he's growing. Like, it takes time. Like, I know these guys get frustrated because they go on winning streaks and they want the meritocracy thing, but the schedule has to work out too, right? Like, and guys are injured, and yeah.
All right, let's quickly run through the undercard here. Trevin Giles took on late replacement James Krause. This was a crazy story. Antonio Arroyo weighed in on Friday and then got ill afterwards, and they removed him from the card. So James Krause was already in town because his training partner, Youssef Zalal, who was going to be on the Fight Pass portion, he was there to corner him, and he said, I'll take the fight. So James Krause just got onto the scale. He was approved to fight. And this guy, who's fought at lightweight and primarily fights now at welterweight, took a middleweight fight against Trevin Giles. And this was a hell of a performance here from James Krause. He dominated the first round. After he did absorb some shots early, but then took Giles down and controlled his back for most of the round, threatening with a rear naked choke with the body triangle applied. And then Giles got free. And then in the second round, Giles just tore him apart in the second round. Krause was exhausted. Giles was just throwing down strikes and then went for a choke right at the end. I thought this was enough to be a 10-8 round, even with the old rules. This was just a one-sided round. And then in the third, it seemed like both were very tired at this point, and it was Giles throwing a lot of heavy shots, Krause trying to throw his own big shots. So I had Giles winning this. I had it 29-27 because I did go 10-8 in this. But for James Krause, he came into this fight on 18 hours notice and went 15 minutes at a weight class above what he fights at. I mean, it was quite the story.
Yeah, it was really impressive. I actually scored it a little bit differently. I had it mostly the same, 10-9, 10-8, but then I gave the last round 10-9 to Krause, even though it was a toss-up.
Yeah.
Because the last 2 minutes in particular, neither was really doing too much, but Krause started the round stronger, and surprisingly stronger, because he had really faded in the second, and like we said, we gave it 10-8, both of us. So it was still impressive, even in defeat, even if I scored it a draw. And I thought, Giles did well as well.
Yeah. I mean, he's, had to switch opponents on 24 hours notice. And, James Krause that's a significant, different opponent than Antonio Arroyo. So yeah, it was a great story, and they had a very good fight together. Lauren Murphy defeated Andrea Lee by split decision. Crowd was not happy with this outcome. The scores were 30-27, 29-28, and then one had it 29-28 for Andrea Lee. I found the first two rounds, very close. I went 29-28 for Andrea Lee. I certainly didn't see how Lauren Murphy won 3 rounds here, but she said she was very proud of her performance, of both of their efforts in this one, as she kind of overtook the boos from the audience. But what did you think about this fight, and did you see Lauren Murphy winning this one?
So I didn't see Lauren Murphy winning this one. I had it 10-9 Lee in actually all 3 rounds. Even the third, I just thought she did the body shots, but
Andrea Lee, sorry, I forgot. This third round was 100% Andrea Lee's round. That was what, with the 30-27, I thought the third round was a clear-cut round for Andrea Lee. At least that's how I viewed it.
Yeah. So even though I scored it for Andrea Lee, all the rounds were close. They were back and forth. I mean, my notes were for all the rounds, fun back and forth round. So they were close. And Lauren Murphy sort of pointed out in the commentary after, she said, she did secure some takedowns. And Andrea Lee kept spitting out her mouthpiece multiple times.
Yeah, she had a lot of problems with this in the first round. It was like twice it fell out of her mouth.
Yeah, and so that can sway things like, are you getting hit? Like, are things hurting? Are you okay? So, like, I wasn't like terribly upset by this decision.
You're a pretty zen person just by your very nature. You don't get upset about too many things, so I guess don't worry. I'll take care of the outrage quotient on this show. Okay, I'll be livid about decisions that go the wrong way.
Fair.
We had Alex Moreno taking on Katlyn Chaos Williams, who is making his UFC debut. This guy has quite the resume. He had won 6 straight fights coming into this one, and he has 14 amateur fights on his record prior to going pro. So he's got a lot more fights than his record of 9-1 would indicate coming into this. Wasted no time. Moreno from Houston got the big reception. Williams did not care. He just rushed at him with these wild shots. He rocked Moreno on his feet and then put him down against the fence after this right uppercut and drilled him with more shots. And this one was over. Chaos Williams wins by knockout, 27 seconds of the first round, his 7th straight win. So very impressive debut.
Definitely. And with a name like Chaos and, that type of fighting style, that can go a long way.
Miles Johns and Mario Bautista fought at 135 pounds. Johns was very patient throughout the first round and then landed this right hand near the end, along with an overhand right, and that was about the most significant strikes of the first round. So not a whole lot happened. In the second, Bautista hit him with this flying knee and just finished him with hammer fists and strikes at 1:41 of the second round. Mario Bautista, this was his 3rd UFC fight. In his UFC debut, he drew Corey Sandhagen, which was probably no fun, and was coming off a win over Jinsu Son last July. So his second win here in the company, occurring in the second round.
Good. Nice to get a finish on a pay-per-view event.
And Fight Pass, we had 3 fights. It kicked off with Youssef Zalal defeating Austin Lingo by unanimous decision on scores of 30-27 across the board. This was, a very good performance. He outstruck Lingo by a margin of 58-16. I had him winning all 3 rounds, as did the judges, and that would be a rarity on this show. So that definitely is the footnote historically on this show, that all the judges started off this night agreeing with one another about a fight that was fairly easy to score.
Yes, it was fairly easy to score. Maybe that's just the criteria for the Texas judges.
Well, maybe after that first fight, they decided, you know what? This will be boring if we all agree. Why don't we have some fun tonight? So then we go to Andre Ewell and Jonathan Martinez, which was our first exposure to one Joe Solis, because we had Andre Ewell, I had winning the first round, and then I scored the second and third for Jonathan Martinez. He was attacking Ewell in the body in the second, attacking him with leg kicks, even dropped Ewell with a leg kick near the end of the round. Then the third was a bit of a slower round. Ewell was favoring his right arm that they suspected on commentary he had injured at some point earlier in the fight. And then Martinez landed this high knee and drilled, they had this flurry at the end of the fight. And then they read the scorecards, and they read them 30-27, 28-29, and 29-28. Andre Ewell gets the split decision, and this was the 30-27 card for Ewell that everyone was up in arms over, because very hard to give 3 rounds to Andre Ewell in this fight.
Well, I mean, Ewell wasn't up in arms because,
man, I really walked into that one. Well, he was, he got the victory here, and this was, I guess telling for the night, because this was the decision that set off Rogan and Krause for the rest of the night to just complain about the judging.
Yeah, because it was just inconceivable. Like, you can make a case that Ewell sort of won the fight, although they were fairly one-sided in their commentary. Like, I thought Martinez won. But, it was, the third round was, debatable. And, the
second there was no chance you could score.
Yeah. But it's that 30-27. It's like that unanimous thing. And then was that when they started talking about the guy not even watching the fight or something?
Yeah. So there was one fight, and it might have been this one, it might have been something later, where Rogan pointed out that one of the judges wasn't even watching the fight. And he made this point, and then he went back to the point a few minutes later, and John Anik said that might be the commissioner. And we never got clarity on whether this was the judge that was supposed to be scoring the fight. Was this a judge that was, he was not on duty for this particular fight? There was no kind of conclusion to it, but that's what Rogan was alleging, that there was a guy who was just talking to someone else and not even watching the fight, which if that was true, that would be pretty bad. That would be so bad, Phil would be pissed.
I'd definitely be upset. Look, I'm already upset. I am upset that somebody who has, what is it, less than a dozen MMA fights under their belt is judging at such a high level. That's just ludicrous.
Yeah, at least fights that went to the decision is what they have listed here. And it would be,
maybe somebody with that little experience, it's better that they're not watching the fights. Maybe it's more accurate that they just flip a coin.
And then the final fight on Fight Pass, Journey Newson knocking out Domingo Pilarte. He won by TKO, 38 seconds of the first round. He just drilled him with this massive right hand and finished him with more strikes on top. This was not a good night for guys from Houston outside of Derrick Lewis. Pilarte, another native of Houston, getting a big reception before he was stopped in this fight. But very, very solid knockout here by Journey Newson.
Yeah, real very quickly got it done. Sort of was pinpoint accurate with the counter, and again, an impressive finish on a pay-per-view show.
So that was UFC 247. I think certainly will be remembered for the main event with Jon Jones and Dominick Reyes, which I thought was an excellent fight. I think one of the best fights this year so far.
Yeah, the whole card. I mean, it was, I mean, the judging sort of marred what was really a excellent event. And thankfully, even though it was, anybody watching would agree that the judging was generally poor, I think rational observers would say that nobody was really truly robbed tonight. At least I didn't see it.
Well, there's going to be, I think,
what are you upset about some of these? Like, were you like,
in terms of the wrong person winning, I would say
maybe Lauren Murphy with that one.
I thought Andrea Lee won that fight. I thought it was those first 2 rounds, as I said, though, were close. Like, I wasn't outraged about that. I definitely felt Jonathan Martinez beat Andre Ewell.
Yeah.
And then the other big one was, with, if you believe Dominick Reyes won, that fight. But to me, it was, I can accept the 48-47 card for Jones. So at worst, you're looking at, okay, there was one bad card in there, but there were still 2 48-47s. Had there been, 3 egregious cards, I think you just would have had people, torching the arena down. But yeah, there was some bad scoring. And I think it's something that you can certainly look at of, who are the people judging these fights and what are the qualifications? Like, if you are someone that has minimal judging experience at the highest level, you probably should not be in a championship fight.
Oh, definitely.
So before we go here, coming up over the next couple of weeks, the UFC is running a card every weekend from now until 2030. Next weekend, they're back with Corey Anderson, Jan Blachowicz, the rematch. After that, it's Paul Felder, Dan Hooker in New Zealand. Then Joseph Benavidez against Devison Figueiredo for the vacant flyweight title on February 29th. And the next time we'll be here is UFC 248, which is a very entertaining card, potentially, on paper. We've got Israel Adesanya versus Yoel Romero, Zhang Wei Li versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk in our 2 title fights. Jared Cannonier, he's taking on the daunting TBD. We'll see if they find a replacement for Robert Whittaker. Edmund Shabazian, who's looked great, against Derek Brunson. Neil Magny against Li Jing Liang. Sean O'Malley is back. Alex Oliveira versus Max Griffin. Benil Dariush is on this show. So this has the potential to be a very good pay-per-view card next month.
Yeah, it seems like the UFC sort of has a couple of strategies. Like if they have a sort of a proven pay-per-view draw, they don't really put too many big names on the card. But if it's, sort of like one of their more like regular pay-per-views, Israel Adesanya is not somebody who's been on pay-per-view a whole lot. He sort of emerged as a star last year. So let's stack the card with, a lot of good fights.
Yeah, I like the main event. I know that, it was, we went over, Yoel Romero getting this title fight. I think this is going to be a really great fight. So I don't have like a big issue with Romero getting this title fight.
No, it's sort of a product of circumstance. The timing was right. The number 1 contender is injured, and Romero's an extremely exciting fighter, and he's never in a dull fight. I just hope he makes the weight. That's the only thing.
Well, he said at the press conference he's never had weight cutting issues. He's never had a problem with weight.
Oh, okay. I'm not concerned then anymore.
Yeah, don't worry about Yoel Romero, who will get an entire week of Embedded focusing on Yoel Romero, 42-year-old Yoel Romero, going for one more title or the chance to have a UFC championship. This might be his last hope.
He can breakdance his weight off.
Could be. Well, Phil, I thank you as always for joining me, keeping me company, being the Zen-like one of the two of us.
Well, I'm working hard out of it. Luckily, I don't have to, at my job, I don't have the Texas Athletics State Commission or whatever deciding if I'm doing a good job or not. So maybe that's why I'm able to be so zen-like, as you say.
Well, is there Is there anything you would like to promote? I understand through the grapevine that you're working on something, but I don't know if it's for the public to be aware of yet. And if not, you can just plug the Korean barbecue or something.
Well, I mean, we seem to be on a mission to try every Korean barbecue in North York. That's
even if it's on back-to-back nights.
Yeah, that's no
the best way
problem.
to enjoy Korean barbecue is just,
I think so.
Keep it steady.
You really can't get enough. So, but no, at this time, that's it. But, I'll let you know if, things change in the future.
All right. Well, you can read the wonderful words of Phil Chertok, every week with 5 questions at postwrestling.com, going through the latest in the world of mixed martial arts. So we'll see what has everyone's ire later this week. And then Phil will, talk you all off of a ledge. So thank you very much, Phil, for joining me. We'll be back next month after UFC 248. And that's it. Good night, everybody.